She came back 3 days early to surprise him. What she walked into took every word right out of her. You know you're the only one, right? Amara. Amara. It isn't what you're thinking. Amara, please don't go. But before this story can be told in full, we have to go back to who she was before any of it touched her. To understand the full weight of everything Amara Osei eventually lost, you first have to understand the kind of woman she was before she lost it. She was not reckless. She was not the kind of woman who pours herself into a relationship and forgets to keep anything in reserve. She had been raised in Lagos by a mother who ran a fabric business with both hands and still found time every Friday evening to sit her daughters at the dining table and remind them, quietly, without decoration, that no person walking this earth had the authority to place a ceiling on what they were worth. Amara held a degree in architecture and urban planning. She had built a career that took her from Lagos to Amsterdam and eventually to Busan. She had a full life before Shin Jun Seo entered it, and she held most of it intact while he was present. Most of it, because that is precisely the thing about falling for someone who is attentive and magnetic and genuinely skilled at making a woman feel like the most important person in any space they share. The falling is gradual enough that you never quite catch the moment when pieces of yourself begin quietly rearranging to accommodate them, until something fractures and you reach for who you used to be and discover that the outline has shifted slightly while you were not watching. Amara was 28 years old. She has the kind of look that feels sharp, polished, and effortlessly confident. The short light hair frames the face and gives a bold, modern edge. Her features appear balanced and striking. She gives the impression of someone who walks into a room quietly, but still gets noticed. She had been in Busan for 2 years. She had learned enough Korean to navigate the city entirely on her own, had built professional friendships and personal ones, had discovered a rice cake shop in Nampo-dong she returned to every week, a walking trail through Ijidi Park that she considered privately hers, a small bookshop in Gwangan where the owner saved interesting architecture publications for her without being asked. Busan had become, in a way she had not originally planned for, home. Thank you for being here. If this is your first time, hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Like and share this video, and drop a comment as the story unfolds. We would love to hear from you. And then there was Shin Jun Seo, 31 years old, software company director, with the kind of unhurried ease that made people unconsciously lean in when he spoke. He had been part of what made Busan feel like home, until a Wednesday evening in October. Amara had been away in Jeju for 5 days, a design residency that concluded a day earlier than planned. She decided against sending him a message. She had been turning the idea of a surprise over in her mind the entire ferry ride back, something warm settling quietly in her chest. The particular pleasure of knowing something good is about to happen before it does. She stopped near Busan Port and bought a small box of the honey pastries he favored from a shop she knew he liked. She smiled to herself on the taxi ride over, a woman who had absolutely no idea what the next 20 minutes would deliver. The apartment was in Houndy, 12th floor, a building with a partial view of the sea on clear evenings. She had a key. The elevator ride up was the last 40 seconds of the life she believed she had been living. She heard music before the doors opened, soft and low, the kind he put on when he felt fully at ease. She heard his voice, warm and unhurried, laughing at something she could not make out. She turned her key in the lock and stepped inside. They were on the sofa together. His hand rested on the woman's shoulder. On the coffee table, candles, real ones, the deliberate kind, burned in a deliberate arrangement. The woman was not a colleague. She was not someone Amara had been introduced to or warned about. She was someone looking at Shin Jun Seo with the exact expression Amara had worn when she thought no one was watching. Jun Seo looked up. All the color left his face. He rose so fast the woman beside him lurched sideways. He said Amara's name like it was a question, like he was hoping she might dissolve. She did not dissolve. She held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she looked at the woman, who had gone completely still. Then she reached for her bag from the floor near the door, turned around, and walked back to the elevator. Amara, wait. Amara, please. The elevator doors drew shut. She rode 12 floors down without making a sound. Outside, the October air of Busan hit her like something physical. Cool and salt-heavy, and entirely uninterested in what had just occurred on the 12th floor of a building she had been calling home. She stood on the pavement with her overnight bag beside her and the pastry box still in her hand. The city moved around her with the unbothered momentum cities always maintain. She did not scream. She did not cry. She stood completely still for a long stretch. The way a person stands when the world has just rearranged itself, and the body needs time to absorb what the mind has already understood. Then she walked. No destination, she simply walked. Past the convenience stores and the grilled fish stalls and the couples who were still unbroken, and the delivery riders, and the people heading home from their evening shifts. All of them moving through their own undamaged nights. She walked until her feet stopped in front of a 24-hour cafe near Gwangali, its windows fogged with warmth, the smell of roasted grain reaching her through the glass. She went in. She ordered corn tea. She sat at a table near the back and stared at the wall. It was past midnight. Her phone had not stopped vibrating since she left the building. Jun Seo's name lighting up the screen over and over, the phone face down on the table. She did not touch it. She thought about who to call. Her mother was in Lagos, deep in the middle of her night. Her closest friend Tabena was in a time zone that made the arithmetic difficult. And the friends she had built here in Busan, she realized sitting in that back corner with the cooling corn tea between her palms, had become their friends, Jun Seo's and hers together. And she did not know in that moment which of them had known something and stayed quiet. That uncertainty made everyone feel, for now, unreachable. Her thumb moved through her contacts. She was looking for something, for a name that belonged to neither the before nor the after of this particular night. She found it. Seo Joon Ha. She had met him 14 months earlier at an international design summit hosted in Busan. He had delivered the opening address. Founder and executive chairman of a coastal infrastructure development group, 34 years old, with silver-white hair he wore without apology. The kind that arrives early in some men and simply looks like a decision. He was built with the composed efficiency of someone who viewed personal discipline as a practice rather than a performance. He was, in the way certain people are without appearing to try, immediately noticeable. But what Amara remembered most from that first meeting was not any of that. It was the quality of his attention. They had ended up at the same table during the summit lunch. He had noticed her name badge and asked about Lagos, mentioned missing Suya from his time at a regional conference in Abuja. And she had laughed a real laugh, the involuntary kind, and they had talked for a full hour about cities and what it costs to build yourself into a place not originally built with you in mind. He gave her his card. She used it once, months later, to ask his opinion on a structural material. He had sent back 2 thoughtful paragraphs and a reference she had not come across before. That was the whole of what they were to each other. A professional connection who had made an impression, whose name sat in her contacts like something pleasant and unresolved. She stared at his name. Then, before she could reconsider, she pressed call. It rang 4 times. She was already forming an apology for the hour when the line connected. Amara. His voice was composed, not thick with sleep. The voice of someone who keeps irregular hours and had not yet wound down. I'm sorry, she said. It's late. I don't actually know why I called you specifically. I needed to say it to someone, and I couldn't think of anyone who wasn't already woven into what just happened. A pause. What just happened? She told him. Not in fragments. Not with drama. She sat in the back corner of that cafe and told Seo Joon Ha, a man she had spoken to perhaps 6 times in over a year, exactly what she had walked into on the 12th floor of a Houndy apartment. When she finished, there was a moment of quiet. Where are you right now? He asked. She told him the cafe. He said, stay there. I'll send you the address of a hotel nearby. Well-maintained, safe street, front desk is 24 hours. Take a car and have them charge the room directly. I'll handle it. You don't need to do that. I know, he said simply. Get some rest. We can talk whenever you're ready. She nearly refused. She was not a woman who accepted things being arranged for her without at least some resistance. But she was also a woman sitting alone in a cafe past midnight holding a pastry box she had never opened. And she was tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. She accepted. The hotel was quiet and smelled of cedarwood and clean linen. The front desk was expecting her. She went to her room, sat on the edge of the bed, and finally let herself cry. Not for long, not with noise, just the private release of a body that has been holding something enormous and needs, at last, to set it down. Then she washed her face, turned off the light, and slept. The next morning arrived gray and still. Amara sat at the window with coffee from the room service tray and read, for the first time, the messages Jun Seo had sent the previous night. There were 13 of them. The first 5 were variations on pleading. The 6th made her set the phone face down on the table. It's not what it appeared to be. She looked out at the sea. It had been precisely what it appeared to be. She had never been more certain of anything. She texted Jun Ha. Thank you for last night. I'm all right. She set the phone down and stepped into the shower. His reply came while she was still in the bathroom. Good. I'm here when you're ready. She was grateful for the absence of pressure in it. Grateful that he had asked no question the night before that she wasn't prepared to answer. Grateful that the help had arrived without any visible cost attached. She spent that day on her own. She walked. She stumbled into a small lunch spot near Nampodong she had never noticed. Run by a woman in her 70s who brought Amara a bowl of janchi guksu without being asked and said something in Korean that Amara slowly translated as something like, "You look like someone who could do with something warm." She ate every bit of it. Before the afternoon ended, she had found a studio listing in Myeongdong, a small space available immediately with a rooftop terrace and wooden floors. She submitted an inquiry before she could second-guess herself. Back at the hotel that evening, she saw that Jun Seo had called 9 more times. She blocked the number for the night. She needed to think, not to decide, because the decision already felt made somewhere below the level of thought. She needed to think about how to say it, and how to mean it, and how to begin building whatever came after. She did not yet know that Shin Jun Seo was not the kind of man who accepts an ending without contesting it. 3 days after the hotel, Amara met Jun Ha in person for the first time since the summit 14 months earlier. He had suggested a private members' lounge he knew in Centum City. A room on the 28th floor with wide windows and a view of the city spreading toward the mountains. The kind of view that makes everything below look manageable and far. He was already there when she arrived. 2 cups of coffee on the table. The kind of settled, unhurried presence that communicates without words that there is nowhere else he needs to be. He rose when she came in. He looked at her with that focused attention she had remembered and said, "You look more composed than I expected." "Low bar," she said. "It is," he agreed, and gestured to the chair across from him with something that was almost a smile. They talked for close to 2 hours. She gave him the full version. He listened the way she remembered him listening over a year ago at the summit. Without interrupting, without steering toward conclusions, without the particular restlessness some people cannot suppress when they are waiting for their own turn to speak. He simply listened, and then she asked something she had not planned to ask. "Do you think I should have seen it coming?" He was quiet for a moment. "I think the people who ask that question are always the ones who trusted. And trusting is not a flaw." She looked at him steadily. "That's a careful answer. It's the honest one." She drank her coffee. Busan outside the window was luminous and indifferent and ongoing. She watched the early evening light shift across the rooftops, and she thought about the last 2 years and what she had built them on. And she felt something she could only describe as the strange, cold clarity that comes when something is finally, undeniably over. "I'm staying," she said, not to him specifically, more to the window, to the city, to herself. "I'm not going back to Lagos. I built something here that has nothing to do with him, and I am not the one who leaves." Jun Ha said nothing, but she caught something shift briefly in his expression, something that looked like approval, something that might have been relief, before he turned back to his coffee. She moved into the Myeongdong studio within 10 days. Wooden floors, east-facing windows that caught the morning light in long, warm stripes across the floor. A small rooftop terrace where she set 2 chairs and a low table and a pot of something green, and which became, over the following weeks, her favorite place in the city. She returned to work. Her colleagues were professional enough not to ask questions she hadn't offered answers to. Jun Seo, meanwhile, had not accepted the situation. He appeared outside her building on the first Saturday. She saw him through the intercom monitor, standing at the entrance with his hands in his jacket pockets, and an expression that on a less composed man she might have read as remorse, but on him read more like expectation. She did not let him in. She watched him stand there for 20 minutes before he left. He called from a different number. She blocked it. He called from another. She blocked that one too. He sent flowers to her office. An enormous arrangement. Birds of paradise and white lilies, the kind that announces itself to the entire floor. Her colleague Dawoon appeared at her desk with wide eyes and the delivery card. Amara looked at the arrangement for 2 full seconds. Take them to the reception area. Tell the building staff they're from the practice. Doon, who had the sense not to ask questions, went to find a trolley. A second delivery arrived the following week. She donated those too. Then a parcel. A book, first edition, rare architecture monograph she had once paused over in a gallery shop and quietly said she admired. She did not open it. She wrote return to sender in marker across the packaging and left it with the front desk. Then came his associates. 2 of them on separate evenings. Men she had met at dinners during the years she and Jun Seo had been together. They arrived with the stiff formality of people assigned a task they had not fully volunteered for. The first delivered a speech. Jun Seo was devastated. He had made a catastrophic error. He understood he had broken something genuine. But he loved her and would spend whatever remained of his life making things right if she allowed him that chance. Amara stood in her doorway and listened to the whole of it. Then she said, "Tell him I heard every word. And tell him not to send anyone else." The second associate came 4 days later. She did not open the door. The calls slowed. The flowers paused for a week. Amara breathed. She met Jun Ha twice that week. Once at the lounge. Once for a walk along Ijidi that stretched to 2.5 hours before either of them noticed. She told him about the flowers, the book, the men who had shown up at her door. He listened with an expression that stayed carefully even, though she noticed something tighten briefly along his jaw when she described the associates who had been dispatched. "He doesn't want to lose you," Jun Ha said. "He didn't seem particularly interested in not losing me when he still had me," Amara replied. Jun Ha looked at her. "No," he said quietly. "That's true." One evening her phone rang from an unknown number. Something made her answer. The voice was Jun Seo's, quieter than she had grown accustomed to in his attempts to reach her, stripped of the performance she had learned to recognize. "I only want to talk," he said. "One conversation. That is all." She was tired. Tired of blocking numbers and redirecting flowers, and having the same immovable boundary tested from every direction. And somewhere beneath the exhaustion, she recognized something. She had never actually said what needed to be said. She had left. She had blocked. She had not spoken. She agreed to meet. A cafe in Siamayan. Neutral ground. 1 hour. He was there before her. He looked, she admitted to herself, like someone who had not been sleeping properly. The composed certainty she was used to seeing on him had given way to something worn around the edges. He stood when she came in. He did not try to embrace her. He spoke for most of the first 30 minutes, and it was the most unguarded she had ever heard him. He spoke about the distance he had felt growing between them in the months before October. Not as justification, he said, but as context he wanted her to have. He spoke about the shame he had been carrying. He described what weeks of silence had taught him, how poorly he had understood what he actually had. He said he had ended things with the other woman the night Amara walked out. He said it was finished. He said that whatever it had had never been love. Real love, he said, was sitting across a table from him right now, not quite able to look at him directly. Amara listened to all of it. She asked him one question. "Why?" "Because I was careless with something that required care," he said. "Because I told myself it didn't count if you didn't know. Because I was weak in a way I didn't know how to face." She sat with that. It was the most honest thing she had ever heard him say, and it opened something in her she had believed was sealed. She did not take him back that day. She told him she needed time. She told him she was making no decision from a place of pain or loneliness, only from clarity, and she wasn't there yet. He accepted that. He said he would wait. He waited with a patience that was new to him. He did not flood her phone. He sent brief, measured messages every few days. A simple check-in, a link to something she had mentioned once in passing, small deliberate things that carried the behavior of a man who had finally understood what intentionality meant. She told Jun Ha about the meeting in Siamayan. He listened without interrupting until she finished. "How did you feel when you left?" he asked. She thought about it honestly. Confused. And a little less angry, which frightened me. Why did it frighten you? Because feeling less angry felt like moving back toward him. And I didn't know if that was judgment or something else. Jun Ha was quiet for a moment. "Those aren't the only 2 possibilities," he said. "It can be neither. It can simply be human. Loving someone is not weakness. Choosing to return is not weakness either, if it is a real choice." He paused. What I cannot tell you is whether what happens if you go back will be different from what happened before. Only you know whether you actually believe it will be." It was the most restrained answer he could have offered. She understood that. She also understood, could almost sense it. That part of him had wanted to say something else entirely. He was giving her the space to arrive at her own decision, which was either the most generous thing anyone had done for her in a long time or the hardest thing she had ever been asked to hold. She could not decide which. She went back to Shin Jun Seo in December. Not with ceremony. Not with declarations. They had dinner at a small place in Nampo that neither had been to before, chosen deliberately for its absence of shared memory. He was different that evening, or performed different so convincingly that no gap was visible. He did not spend the meal talking about himself the way he usually did. He asked about her current project, a coastal infrastructure redesign that had suffered because the previous months had made concentration an act of will. He remembered details she was certain she had mentioned only once. He was attentive in the way people are when they understand that attention is exactly what is being asked of them. She did not take him back that night. She said she needed more time. He nodded and did not push. 3 more dinners followed, each careful, each slowly rebuilding something that had existed before October. She was aware she was being guided toward a destination. She was aware, and she went anyway, because she had known this man for 2 years and had loved him in ways that do not simply dissolve because that love was treated carelessly. She was aware, too, and this was harder to sit with, that part of her return was about refusing to let grief be the only ending her story was permitted to have. She wanted to be the woman who believed in people, who gave the second chance and watched it become something worth giving. She wanted that version. She moved back into the Houndy apartment before January ended, and she told the part of herself that was accountable for the decision. This is a choice made with full sight. She was not pretending October had not happened. She was deciding deliberately that people are capable of change, and that genuine love is worth the risk of believing in that. She believed it. She genuinely, fully believed it. For 4 weeks, she believed it. Those weeks had a quality all their own. The careful tenderness of 2 people who know they are on fragile ground and move accordingly. He was home in the evenings. He cooked twice, badly, with visible effort enough that she laughed and took over, standing beside him showing him things his mother had apparently never managed to teach. They watched films on weekend afternoons. They walked to the fish market on Sunday mornings and disagreed pleasantly over which things to buy. The way couples disagree about small things as a way of showing they feel safe enough to have opinions in each other's presence. They talked more honestly than they had before October. She watched him for signs of the man she now knew existed beneath the surface. She saw nothing, which was either evidence that he had genuinely changed or evidence that he had grown more practiced at concealment. She would not know which until she did. It was a Thursday night. She had fallen asleep first. Jun Seo was still beside her when she woke just past midnight, pulled back up by something at the edge of sleep. His phone on the nightstand lit briefly, a notification arriving and fading. She would not have reached for it. She would not have looked, except that in the blur of half-waking, her eyes found the screen in the moment before it dimmed, and she read the message before she understood she was reading it. Last night was worth the wait. Is she out of the picture yet? I want to see you again. Amara lay without moving. She listened to his breathing, slow and regular. She looked at the ceiling. The room was dark. The city outside pressed faint light through the curtains. She was aware of every detail with the hyperclarity the body produces when it is absorbing something catastrophic. Last night, she had been at a client dinner the previous evening. She had come home at 9:30. He had been on the sofa reading. He had smiled when she came in. He had asked about the client. He had been warm and present and entirely, fluently normal. He had been with someone else that same day. She got up. She moved through the apartment with the quiet deliberateness of someone who has already made her decision and is simply completing the necessary steps. She dressed. She took her largest bag from the wardrobe and packed what mattered. Her documents first, her laptop, the things that were entirely hers and no one else's. She moved through the rooms without turning on any lights, navigating by memory and the gray glow of the city through the windows. Then she sat at the kitchen table, their kitchen table, the one she had chosen, and she wrote a note. It is over. Do not look for me. Do not call. Do not send anyone. Do not send anything. This is the last time I will leave without warning. The next time you hear from me, it will be through a lawyer. She did not write that she was devastated. She did not write that she had loved him. She did not write anything that could be read as an opening. She placed the note on his phone. She picked up her bag. She left her key on the kitchen counter. She walked out and did not look back. The elevator ride down was entirely different this time. In October, she had descended in shock, the world still catching up to her eyes. This time, she rode down carrying something else. A cold, clear fury, yes, but beneath the fury, something quieter and more lasting. The knowledge that she had given the second chance and watched it be spent. The knowledge that there would be no third. Once is a choice, she thought. Twice is a character. Not because transformation is impossible. She still believed, in principle, that people could change. But because this particular person had looked directly into her eyes for 4 weeks and performed change without doing it, had used her willingness to believe in him as cover for continuing exactly what he had been doing before, had not transformed, had simply become more careful at hiding. She walked out of the building and called Jun Ha. He picked up on the second ring. She did not apologize for the hour. It happened again, she said. A pause. Then quietly, "Where are you?" She gave him the address. He said, "Don't move." 20 minutes later, a car arrived, not a cab. His car. Him in it, wearing a coat thrown hastily over what were clearly pajamas underneath. When she got in and saw the coat over the pajamas, the laugh arrived before she could stop it. He glanced at her. She was grateful, again, that he said nothing requiring a response. He drove her back to the hotel in Gwangali, a different room from October, but the same smell of cedarwood. He walked her to the door. "Sleep," he said. "Everything else in the morning." "Thank you again," she said. "Stop thanking me." She looked at him in the corridor light. The coat over the pajamas, the silver hair unstyled, his face carrying the particular openness that comes with the very late hour. He looked real. Not the summit speaker, not the chairman, not the person responsible for hundreds of staff. Just a man who had gotten out of bed and driven across Busan because someone needed him to. She said, "I'm not going back to him." He looked at her steadily. "I know. I mean it this time." "I know you mean it," he said, not as reassurance, but as a statement from someone who had already observed what he needed to in order to be certain. That distinction settled something in her. She went inside. She slept without dreaming. What followed in the weeks after was not what she had expected. She had anticipated the usual pattern. The calls, the messages, the familiar scramble of someone caught and now trying to recover. She had not anticipated the full scope of what he was capable of. He called her office twice on Monday morning before she had finished her first coffee. She asked the receptionist to say she was unavailable. He sent the flowers again. Not birds of paradise this time, but something larger and more grandiose, requiring 2 delivery people and filling an entire corner of the reception area. Doon appeared at Amara's desk with the same wide eyes. Amara looked at the arrangement for 2 seconds flat. "Give them to the cafe downstairs. Tell them they're from the practice." Doon, who had watched this unfold before, nodded and found a trolley. His associates returned. She did not open the door. One reached her through a mutual contact, a woman named Yijin, someone Amara had genuinely liked, who texted carefully. "He's not doing well. He asked if you'd consider talking." Amara replied, "I have nothing more to say to him. Please don't let him put you in the middle of this." Yijin sent a single respectful message in response and contacted her no further on his behalf. But Jun Seo himself was not finished. He began appearing at the coffee shop 2 blocks from her studio in Milakdong, which she had re-signed the lease on after leaving Houndy. He showed up at the subway entrance she used most mornings, positioned casually, performing coincidence, hands in pockets, wearing the expression of a man framing this situation as something being done to him rather than the direct result of his own repeated choices. The first time she encountered him at the station, she walked past without stopping. The second time she said, "Jun Seo, stop this." He said he only wanted to talk. She said they were finished talking, finished with everything, and to please stop appearing at places she would be. He said she was making something larger than it was. She looked at him for a long, quiet moment. 40 years from now, she thought, he would still be the man who told a woman he had wronged that she was exaggerating. That was not something she could correct for him. She walked away. The third time he appeared, outside a restaurant where she was having dinner with 2 colleagues, Something shifted from uncomfortable to something that required a different kind of response entirely. She looked at him through the restaurant window and felt a cold, specific recognition that had nothing to do with heartbreak. This was no longer a man expressing remorse. This was a man who had decided his desire to have her back outweighed her right to move forward. She called Jun Ha that evening. She had been calling him quite a lot. They spoke most days now, sometimes about things that mattered, sometimes about nothing at all. She had noticed, and was aware that she was noticing, how much of the texture of her daily life had come to involve him. The early morning messages. The dinners that had quietly become a standing weekly arrangement. The way she set observations aside throughout the day because she wanted to tell him later. She noticed all of it and was careful with what she allowed herself to feel. Because she knew she was not yet the woman she wanted to be before she let herself fall into anything new. But she called him that evening and described what was happening. The restaurant appearance, the cumulative pattern of all of it together. She listened to the brief silence that followed. "This isn't grief anymore," he said. "This is harassment." "I know," she said. "You need to document everything," he said, and his voice had shifted, still steady, but something crisper beneath it. "Every incident, date, location, what was said, who witnessed it, photographs when possible. I know a solicitor. She is excellent. I would like to give you her name." Amara was quiet. "You think it reaches that point? I think it already has. But either way, you should know where the line is and what tools you have when it is crossed." She wrote down the solicitor's name. She began keeping a record on her phone. 2 weeks later, in a restaurant in Haeundae, Jun Seo crossed the line. Amara was there with Jun Ha. It was a Thursday evening, the first week of March, and they had settled into the rhythm of dinner every Thursday. The anchor of the week, a meal that had come to feel increasingly like something they both looked forward to in ways that were not entirely about the food. They were at a corner table, talking about something light, when she saw him. He came in with a group she did not recognize, taking a table not far from theirs. His eyes found her immediately, and she understood from his expression that the choice of table was not accidental. She kept her attention on Jun Ha. She did not react visibly. But she felt Jun Seo's presence sitting across her evening like a smear on glass. Not catastrophic, just fouling the clarity. 20 minutes later, he walked over. He stood at the edge of their table. He looked at Jun Ha with an expression performing calm while achieving the opposite. Then he looked at Amara and said her name. She said, "Jun Seo." "Not here," he said. "Who is this?" Jun Ha did not rise. He did not raise his voice. He looked at Jun Seo with the measured stillness of someone who has learned that authority has nothing to do with volume. "She asked you not to do this here," he said. Something ugly surfaced briefly in Jun Seo's composure. "Amara, you don't have to do this to spite me." He gestured toward Jun Ha. "This is none of your concern anymore," she replied. He reached forward and grabbed her by the wrist, pulling, nearly dragging her from her chair. She pulled back. "He is going to use you." His voice was rising now. "And you haven't already?" she said, her voice dropping into something flat and clear and entirely finished. "Stop this, Jun Seo. It is over. Do you understand that?" The surrounding tables had gone silent. A server was already moving toward them. "Amara, don't make me do this," he said, and he reached into his jacket and produced a small blade, pointing it toward her. Amara did not move. She did not raise her voice. She looked at him with an expression she had not planned. Clear, unafraid, complete. The expression of a woman who has now heard everything this person is capable of and has already moved past it. Jun Ha rose. Not aggressively, simply rose, which shifted the entire weight of the moment. He said to Jun Seo, without raising his voice, "You are going to leave right now, or I will call the police. That is your decision to make." The restaurant manager arrived, 2 servers behind him. "Sir, I am asking you to leave the premises." The room was watching. Jun Seo's group at their table had the expressions of people who had not agreed to be part of this. He left. Amara and Jun Ha sat back down. The restaurant slowly reclaimed its noise. A server refilled their water glasses without comment. Amara became aware that her hands, beneath the table, were completely still. She was not trembling. She was not about to cry. She was sitting in a restaurant in Haeundae feeling, beneath the adrenaline, something that surprised her with its clarity. She was finished being afraid of him. She called the solicitor the next morning. Attorney Kwon Mire had the particular economy of language that the best legal professionals develop. No unnecessary words, no hollow comfort, just precision applied directly to a problem. Amara walked her through 7 weeks of documented incidents. The office calls, the flowers, the subway station appearances, the restaurant incident, with dates and locations and witnesses attached. Attorney Kwon listened. Then she said, "This qualifies for a restraining order under the relevant provisions. The restaurant incident alone is sufficient, with the witnesses present. Do you want to proceed?" "Yes," Amara said. The application was filed the following week. Jun Ha had quietly spoken with the 2 colleagues who had been at the earlier dinner, who provided written statements without hesitation. Attorney Kwon moved efficiently. The order was granted. When Jun Seo received it, she heard from Yi Jin, who reached out one final time with appropriate gravity, that he had been stunned, that he had not believed she would actually do it, that he had told people she was overreacting. Amara read that and felt nothing in particular. Not satisfaction, not residual hurt, nothing which was, she understood, itself a kind of answer. There is a particular quality of freedom that comes when you have placed the full weight of a legal document between yourself and someone who did not respect the word no. It does not arrive with ceremony. There is no music, no sense of triumph. It comes quietly, the way a door sounds when it is properly locked after the last person has left. Just the small, definitive sound of something being secured. Amara felt it the afternoon Attorney Kwon confirmed the order had been served. She was at her desk when the message came through. She read it, set her phone down, and returned to the design drawing she had been working on. She finished it without interruption for the first time in weeks. The calls stopped. The appearances stopped. The flowers stopped. The mutual contacts, after Yi Jin, sent nothing more. And the city, which had briefly become a landscape of low-level threat, the particular anxiety of never knowing where he might appear next, became hers again. Just hers. Ordinary, loud, running at its own pace, entirely indifferent to the private dramas of the people living inside it. She began noticing things she had stopped noticing. The way morning light came through the east windows of the Millikdong studio, laying warm stripes across the wooden floor. The sound her neighborhood made on weekday mornings. Fish market delivery trucks, school children, the particular calls of the vendors along the waterfront road. A small noodle shop 4 blocks from her studio she had walked past dozens of times and never entered, which turned out to serve a cold soba she dreamed about twice in the same week and returned to every Thursday for a month. She was rebuilding something. She could feel it happening. Not a reconstruction of what had come before, but something new, assembled from her own materials, for herself alone, without needing it to be witnessed or validated. March arrived. Busan moved from winter into early spring with its particular reluctance. Cool gray mornings that opened, unexpectedly, into afternoons of thin gold light. People reappeared along the Gwangali waterfront. Street food carts set up earlier. Amara walked to her studio one morning and found herself actually looking at the light on the water, at the particular blue of the sky above the bridge, at the way a plum tree 1 block from her building had begun to show the faintest white at the tips of its branches. She had been moving through the city for months in a posture of managed endurance, functional but slightly braced. Walking that morning, she realized the brace had come loose. She and Jun Ha walked along Gwangali Beach that Saturday. It was the kind of day Busan occasionally produces in early spring. Cold enough to need a coat, bright enough to force a squint, the sea holding the light in a way that made the whole coastline look composed of something finer than it was. They had been walking for over an hour, in and out of easy conversation, when something shifted in the quiet between them. Not uncomfortably, more like a pressure, the kind that gathers when something has been present for a long time and is finally ready to be named. She had been aware of it for weeks. Not only the warmth she felt in his company, which she had felt since December and had been careful not to label. Something more specific. The way she reached for her phone to tell him things throughout the day. Not because she needed advice, but because a thought had occurred to her and he was simply the person she most wanted to share it with. The way his morning messages had become, without either of them designing it that way, the first thing she looked for when she woke. The way she had caught herself more than once watching his face while he talked and thinking something she was not yet ready to say aloud. She had been deliberate with herself through all of it. Careful in the way you are careful with something new and unfamiliar. Giving it the right conditions, and then watching rather than forcing. She had been conscious of the risk of reaching toward the nearest available warmth when what you are really feeling is grief. She had watched herself for those signs. What she found instead was something more considered. Something that had grown not from need but from sustained, daily, attentive knowledge of who this person actually was. He was honest in ways she had not expected from someone in his position. He spoke about his failures without performing humility. He spoke about his company not as an accomplishment, but as a responsibility he genuinely carried. He spoke about his father with a love that was not sentimental, but entirely real. He disagreed with her, about design philosophy, about city planning, about the relative character of different Busan neighborhoods. With the pleasure of someone who found a good argument genuinely worth having. He was funny in the quiet, internal way people are funny when humor is a private thing rather than a performance. He was in all the ways that matter and several that simply felt good. A person she wanted to keep knowing. She looked at him. He was watching the sea. His silver hair was catching the light. His profile was one she admitted to herself, memorized without intending to. "Can I tell you something?" she said. He looked at her. "Yes. I don't want you to be the person I call when things fall apart," she said. "I'm grateful for that. I'll always be grateful for that. But I don't want that to be the whole of what this is." She paused. "I've been careful. Deliberately careful, because I didn't trust my own judgment after everything, and I think that was right. I needed that time." Another pause. "But I think I've known for a while what this is. I've just been waiting until I felt enough like myself again to say it out loud." He turned to face her fully. The careful containment he usually maintained was not in place. What was there instead was something she had been catching glimpses of for months. Something large and specific and patient. A feeling that had been waiting without ever demanding, exactly as he himself had been waiting. He said, "I have known since before October. Since the first time I sat at a summit table across from you and understood that you were going to matter to me." She looked at him. "You never said anything. You were with someone," he said simply. "And then you weren't, and you were hurting. And then you gave someone a second chance that I watched you give. Because you are the kind of person who believes in people even when they have not earned it." A pause. "I was not going to make any of those moments about me." The breath left her slowly. "Jun Ha." "Yes." She took a step toward him. "I am choosing you," she said. "Not because you were there. Not because you helped me. Because I have spent months watching who you are, and you are the most genuinely decent person I have ever known. And I would like, if you are still interested, to find out what this looks like when neither of us is managing a crisis." He laughed, the unguarded version, his whole face open, nothing held in reserve, the one she had been quietly collecting since December. Then he reached out and tucked a strand of her natural hair gently behind her ear with the kind of tenderness that does not perform itself. He said, "I have been interested since a design summit in Busan 14 months ago." She laughed too. They stood at the edge of Gwangali Beach in early March with the cold and the light around them and the city at their backs. There was no dramatic music, no perfectly timed sunset. There were two people standing on a waterfront promenade in their winter coats, laughing, which may be the most honest way anything real has ever begun. He held her hand on the walk back. She let him hold it, and then she held his in return, and that was enough. And it was everything. The spring light came in April. They visited Gamcheon Culture Village on a Saturday when the hillside neighborhood was washed in warm color. Terracotta and cerulean and yellow, the painted walls catching the afternoon sun, the narrow staircases winding upward past murals and hand-painted tiles, and the small sculptures tucked into unexpected corners. Jun Ha bought hotteok from a stall near the entrance and watched Amara try to eat one without burning her hand and fail entirely, and he laughed his full laugh, the one she had been collecting all winter, and she laughed at herself, and the afternoon moved around them both. Later they found a rooftop terrace near the top of the village where the city spread below them toward the sea, and they stood without talking, which had become their way. The comfortable silence built across months of coffee and honest conversation, and walks neither of them wanted to end. He said quietly, "My mother used to say that the people who end up mattering most in a life are almost never the ones you saw coming. They arrive at unexpected hours, at summits and solicitors' offices and waterfront cafes past midnight. And the only way you know they are meant to stay is that you choose them again every single day, and the choosing never once feels like something it costs you. She was quiet for a moment. Is this your way of telling me I matter? He looked at her with that expression, the one she had first seen glimpses of in December, and had been learning to read in all its gradations ever since. Yes, he said simply. I thought I should say it plainly. She smiled. The kind that arrives before you have decided to give it. You are not usually this direct. I have been building up to it, he said. And there was something almost shy in it, a version of him she had not encountered before. And she found it, with a warmth that settled in her chest like something that intended to stay, entirely wonderful. She reached up and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers immediately, the way a hand closes when it has been waiting to hold something and finally gets to. They stood on that rooftop in Gamcheon with the warm light and the painted city below them. She thought briefly about October, about 12 floors in an elevator, about a cafe at midnight and cooling corn tea, and the particular solitude of the hours when your life has changed shape and you do not yet know what the new shape will be. She thought about the drive to the hotel in pajamas, about the restraining order filed cleanly and without drama, about flowers redistributed to co-workers who admired them without ever knowing the story attached. She thought about all of it and felt it fully without needing to set it aside. The grief had been real. The loss had been real. None of what she had been through was erased by where she was standing now. But where she was standing now was real too. Completely, fully, undeniably real. She looked at Jun Ha beside her. Silver hair, warm eyes. A man who had driven across Busan in pajamas and arranged hotel rooms and solicitors' names and walked beside her through an entire winter, listening without agenda and disagreeing about things worth the disagreement, and making her laugh on days when laughter had felt like the last available thing. A man who had opened a door without ever pushing her through it, and waited on the other side with extraordinary patience while she found her way back to herself. A man who had wanted her, the whole of her, the version still standing and the version still being put together, since a conference table in Busan before any of this had happened. She thought about what it meant to be chosen like that. Not rescued. Not needed. Chosen. The light kept coming. The city was loud and warm and ongoing. She was home. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Drop in the comments the one word that describes where you are in your own story right now. Subscribe so you never miss what comes next, because this is not the only story worth telling, and every single one of them is here waiting for you. Now, before this story ends, there is something worth sitting with, because Amara Osei's story is not simply a story about love finding her on the other side of a loss. It is a story about what it means to stay, to refuse to let someone else's failure become the reason you abandon the life you built. It is a story about what it costs to trust again after trust has been broken, and what it looks like to do that slowly and honestly, and without skipping the parts that are hard. She stayed in Busan. She rebuilt her life in the very city where Jun Seo had been a chapter, and she did not allow his failures to write her departure. She went back to him once, and she let that be what it was, a human choice made with love, made with full knowledge of the risk. And when it cost her what it cost, she left without collapse and without drama. She got up in the middle of the night and packed her bag and wrote one clear sentence and walked out a door she did not look back through. That moment was not a failure. It is important to say that plainly. It was not where she got it wrong. It was where she got it exactly right. She had given the second chance with integrity. She had received the truth in return. The truth was that some people are not capable of the change they perform with such fluency. And the mercy she showed herself was in recognizing that truth quickly, acting on it without hesitation, and refusing to be talked back into something that had now shown her its nature twice. There are women who would have stayed after that second message on the phone screen. Not because they were weak, but because forgiveness had become a kind of identity, because the relationship had become the whole of the self, because the alternative, leaving and rebuilding and beginning again under the weight of grief still working its way through them, felt impossible. Amara understood those women. She had been very close to becoming one. The difference was not exactly courage. It was clarity. The specific, cold clarity that arrives at midnight when a screen lights up and the message on it removes the last remaining possibility of doubt. She had her answer. She had always known the question. She simply needed it delivered in a form too clear to misread. And then she did what came next, quietly, without a public audience, without declarations. She documented. She filed. She protected herself with the practical tools available to her, and she moved forward, and she did not look back with anything that could be mistaken for longing. She let herself be helped by someone who deserved to offer it. She let that help grow into something more in its own time, at her own pace, when she was ready, when she was whole enough to choose rather than simply receive. She was careful about that distinction. She watched it from a distance for months before she gave it a name. And when she named it, she did so standing upright, with both feet on solid ground. Not falling, not clutching, not converting grief into desire and calling it love. She chose deliberately, with her whole self and her open eyes, and every lesson her upbringing had given her about knowing her own worth. That is the story worth telling. If this story connected with you, share it with someone who needs it. Leave a comment below. What one word describes where you are right now in your own journey? Subscribe and come back, because there are more stories here, and every single one of them was made for you.